Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled Fandango Friday, where we're going to cover a potpourri of topical subjects. I'm just going to touch on them. But before we get started on potpourri, Fandango, foolish dancing, I do have an update on the news story regarding the triple homicide murders in Benedict Canyon, which our media fake friends have mislabeled as Beverly Crest area of Los Angeles. So a good way to conceal the fact that we're talking about Benedict Canyon, just below where Jack Nicholson lives and where Marlon Brando used to live, above Franklin Canyon. And to be real specific, that's why you come to my channel. To be real specific, we're talking about the address 2799 Ellison Drive, which is the last home on the dead end of a cul-de-sac called a drive, even though it's a dead-end cul-de-sac. And it is essentially above Franklin Canyon and below the Jack Nicholson estate, within 1/2 of a mile from Jack Nicholson's driveway. Now, there is no through street access to Mulholland Drive, which is the closest main thoroughfare to escape the crime scene. In other words, you would either have to, on foot, climb a embankment of weeds up to Summit Ridge Drive and then get through 3 or 4 security gates to get over to Mulholland Drive, or to Jack Nicholson's house, or to Warren Beatty's old house, because Warren Beatty also lived directly atop Ellison Drive. But if you wanted to drive a car, you'd have to drive back down Ellison Drive and eventually pop out onto Benedict Canyon Drive, and then have to make a decision about whether going north up to Mulholland Drive or south to Sunset Boulevard and make your escape that way. Anyway, there's a crack in the case. It's a triple homicide, death of 3 people. You may remember 2 of the people were from Chicago. Ayanna Hutton, age 33, from Chicago. Nina Davis, who's from Bolingbrook, Chicago, which is near Cicero. She's 29. Nina Davis, age 29. And then we have the Destiny Sims, age 26, and she's from Buckeye, which is code for Phoenix, Arizona. So you have 3 black girls, all murdered with semi-automatic rifles. It appears that these were rifle shots. And they died. And then allegedly there are 4 other people who were fragged with semi-automatic weapon fire and didn't die and have never been named in the media. And today's story is May 12th, 2023, where they've arrested 3 hooligans, 2 from Chicago and 1 in New York City, on these 3 murders, plus a 4th murder in Chicago of a Chicago man, and unnamed. And that happened, I guess, yesterday, and it's being reported today. On Friday, Fandango Friday, we have the arrest of Derry Stanford, age 28. He's actually in New York City in custody. Dante Williams, age 22. I said age 22. He's from Chicago. And then we have DeJean Tompkins, age 28, from Chicago. And those 2, Dante Williams and DeJean Thompson, have been charged in court with 3 counts of murder, 6 counts of attempted murder, and 6 counts of assault. All right, so that's them. And Derry Stanford is going to be charged with 4 homicide murders, the 1 man in Chicago plus the 3 ladies from Benedict Canyon: Ayanna Hutton, Nia Davis, Destiny Sims. So you see, the police have wrapped up this case. They claim that they solved the crime by eyewitnesses saying that they saw the shooters flee in a Tesla, an Elon Musk Tesla electronic car, and I presume they mean driving back down Ellison Drive to Benedict Canyon. I can't imagine that the Tesla can go off-road and head up to Mulholland not to mention getting around the security gates. There's so much to not believe about this story, right? Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that this Beverly Crest area is part of Benedict Canyon, and it's in the neighborhood where Paul Allen owns all that land. It's in the Paul Allen Land Trust, known as the Enchanted Hillside, which is above Sharon Tate's murder site. And Ann Margaret and Eddie Murphy live in that zip code also. They live on the west side of Benedict Canyon. Ellison Drive is on the east side of Benedict Canyon. But as the crow flies, it's probably, 1,200 meters or less distance from this scene, 2799 Ellison Drive, to get to Eddie Murphy's house. As driving the car, that's probably a mile and a quarter distance. But as the crow flies, it's closer to 1,000 yards, okay? Because if you went in a straight line, you wouldn't have all those curvy turns. The media has never identified the location of the car that was shot in the driveway. It was a black SUV with these three ladies inside the car. They just say the 2700 block of Ellison Drive, but I'm telling you it's 2799, specifically that driveway. So feel free to Google 2799, check out the driveway, and you'll see where this so-called triple homicide occurred, and it occurred on January 28th, 2023 at 2:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, meaning that it was a Friday night, a Fandango Friday night party of January 27th that spilled over into the wee hours of the morning when we were so fortunate to have Indian Bollywood actress Rachel David wearing a dog collar at 3 o'clock in the morning telling us how she was driving home from wherever she drives from at 2:30 in the morning. And she said that she couldn't get to her house because the police had barricaded the cul-de-sac. Rachel David wearing a dog collar, and she's about 27 years old. And she's telling you what you need to know about a triple homicide. I was back in the morning, wee hours of Saturday, January 28th, 2023. January 28th, 2023. Now this bookends a 100-year, 1 century of homicide murders occurring in Benedict Canyon. You may remember that before we had this triple homicide and before we had the Sharon Tate murders, which was 5 murders, and before we had Jean Harlow's husband get shot in the back of the head, Paul Levy Byrne wearing Jean Harlow's perfume and typing a suicide note and then shooting himself in the back of the head with a .38. Before we had that, before we had Superman, George Reeves, taking 4 shots of a pistol to kill himself. Took him 4 shots to kill himself on Benedict Canyon Drive. Walking distance from where Paul Byrne had killed himself, 20 years earlier. Before all that, we had, of course, Thomas Ensay. And I will post the link below. Thomas Ensay was a married man having an affair with Marion Davies, who was having a long affair with William Randolph Hearst, who's also married. And Marion Jones is not married, but she has 2 married boyfriends. Thomas Ensay, who's a Hollywood producer, director, who lives at 1051 Benedict Canyon Drive, where Elizabeth Montgomery ended up living in the home, a stone's throw away from that address, on a cul-de-sac, where on Benedict Canyon Drive, near 1051 Benedict Canyon Drive. And you can see that Thomas Ensay was murdered, and that was in November 24th, 1924. So I'm going to put down in my book that the first Benedict Canyon military murder occurred on and around November 24th, 1924, and the most recent triple homicide occurred, a few months ago on January 28th, 2023. It's about 99 years of murders. And I'm not going to go down the list. Anyway, so that's my update today, is that they have 3 suspects in custody, 1 in New York City, 2 in Chicago, none in Los Angeles. The police say that the witnesses say that the Tesla was heading, south. So the police somehow magically found 8600 block of Wilshire Boulevard, where they found an apartment that was vacant, that they think the shooters were staying. Hey, I'm here to tell you, people, personally, if you're going to commit a homicide in Benedict Canyon, you stay in one of the homes in Benedict Canyon. That way you can walk to work and walk home from work. Nobody needs to be in a Tesla driving down to Sunset Boulevard and Rodeo Drive and Wilshire Boulevard to escape or flee a crime scene. You just stay next door or a couple houses down the cul-de-sac, and those homes are exempt from search missions because the Los Angeles Police Department and the crack Beverly Hills Police Department, who cracked the Menendez case, they did not crack the Menendez case. Anyway, they don't have the authority to go searching through the 1,000 homes that are in Benedict Canyon. Something like that. I forget the number of homes that are in there. They've built some more homes. All right, that's the end of my homicide discussion regarding Benedict Canyon, the gift that keeps on giving. All right, so now to get back to Fandango Friday, let me just say that we've learned in my research that the clandestine services, which is employed by our banks who fancy themselves as social anthropologists, who want to herd the sheep or depopulate the planet how they see fit in private, that they adopt applied linguistics. Thank you, Noam Chomsky, for demonstrating liar, liar, pants on fire mendacity, which we all appreciate your dedication to an entire career. And they use terms like, for example, I don't know how many of you took business classes in university, but they talk about our banking system, which is a fraudulent enterprise. They don't use those terms. They call it fractional reserve banking. We have a fractional reserve banking system. Well, that's a mendacity terminology of applied linguistics, because anything that's fractional, meaning less than 100%, is perilous. It's perilous. It's imbalanced. In other words, it doesn't balance. What they're saying is that the banks lend money and have insufficient collateral, because in order to have a banking system, you would need collateral in the form of gold, silver, secured property like real estate, VIN numbers on cars and motorcycles, airplanes. You'd have to be able to identify the property. And banks do secured lending. Don't think they don't. Of course they do. But the majority of bank lending is unsecured, insecured, meaning exposed to loss. And when we talk about secured banking, where we have collateral specifically identified, like the automobile dealers all have flooring lines, which are supported by the VIN numbers of the cars on their lot, and the registration paperwork. When you sell a car, you have to re-register the car from the bank to the new owner, and that's based on payment. Then the flooring line has to be repaid backwards. Whenever a car rolls off the lot, there has to be a repayment of the flooring line. Anyway, I can tell you, though, if there was some problem with sales and the inventory built up, that the valuation of those cars would decline, and then the collateral value would decline, and thereby the flooring line loan would be then exposed to loss, because you only can secure your loans sufficient to the collateral that you have after you dispose of it, because there's disposal charges to sell off your collateral to repay your loan. Now, the banks don't have anything at stake here, people. When they make loans, they just do it on fiat, on authority, the self-appointed authority. So when we say a bank loses $1 billion or $100 million, it doesn't matter. They never had the money in the first place. And when we talk about fractional reserve banking, you're talking about having less than 1/10,000th of 1% collateral for all the loans that are outstanding. When you take into account that if you did a fire sale, if we had a bank collapse and the whole economy crunched, then the valuation of collateral would go down 90% or more. And the only people that could afford to buy the collateral would be the banks themselves, because they're the only people that have unlimited fake credit. So the entire system is based on a mendacity. It's all based on a lie. It's all based on a criminal enterprise of fraud. So when we say fractional reserve banking, what we're saying is punking you out with a psychops. There's no such thing as a bank failure. There's no such thing as a bank. There's no such thing as a money system. What there is a private club of perverted people who perform acts of terrorism upon the citizens in order to chisel the anthropology plans they want. Some other examples of applied linguistics that gets into the vernacular, gets into the milieu of different groups in our society that becomes part of our common language is vocabulary words like or phrases, colloquial terms such as, oh, he drank the Kool-Aid. And that is a subtle reference to Jonestown in British Guiana, which never existed. There was no Jonestown. There was a People's Temple agricultural product in British intelligence, British Guiana, where you would need CIA and State Department clearances to lease property or to use property in British Guiana. And there was no Kool-Aid ever present at Jonestown or People's Temple. Yeah, there was Flavor Aid. So they can't even get the Kool-Aid drink correct. It's Flavor Aid. It's a different product. No mention of the fact that there was a massive pharmacy at the People's Temple Pharmacy, agricultural project. There were paramilitary guards with M16 rifles. No mention of that. No mention that Sharon Tate's home was part of a doppelganger twin property at 10048 Cielo, which is 150 feet down the ice plant from where the murder scene was. There's a duplication swimming pool, pool house, and murder house of Sharon Tate. In other words, a Hollywood set below the Hollywood porn set. Because I think where Sharon Tate was killed was used for porn and parties and homicide. All right. Now, I like to use Jim Jones as a metaphor for all things corrupt because Jim Jones himself may have been a nice person. Apparently a lot of people got along with Jim Jones. Our fake governor of California, Jerry Brown, endorsed him. Our fake president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, when he was governor of California, he wrote a beautiful letter endorsing and congratulating Jim Jones on his achievements in public service of his fake church, the People's Temple, which is clandestine service. You should know that Jim Jones didn't just come from under a rock. He came from the University of Indiana, where he married his wife and was given financial support and created the People's Temple. This is the university that brought you Gus Grisham, who thought the Apollo program was a lemon, and he was done away with, killed, Apollo 1. In 1967, in January 1967, Gus Grisham of the University of Indiana, the very first Apollo astronaut, got killed. And then later we brought you Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, came from the same place Gus Grisham came from, Purdue University, University of Indiana campus. That's where Jim Jones came from. That's where Bill and Emily Harris came from. You know, they kidnapped Patricia Hearst, William Randolph Hearst's granddaughter. You know, William Randolph Hearst, whose best friend Thomas Ince was murdered in Benedict Canyon at 1051 Benedict Canyon Drive. Yeah, that Randolph Hearst, that Patricia Hearst, that Bill and Emily Harris came out of Indiana near Purdue campus. Anyway, when Jim Jones was sent from Indianapolis to San Francisco, he befriended everybody. Willie Brown, has a relationship with our vice president, Kamala Harris, sugar baby, sugar daddy, sugar baby, sugar daddy. That Willie Brown, sugar daddy. Sugar daddy Willie Brown was a friend of Jim Jones. So was the future mayor of San Francisco, who got murdered right after Jim Jones got murdered, was George Moscone, was a personal friend with Jim Jones. And like I said, Ronald Reagan praised Jim Jones. Our governor, fake governor Jerry Brown, he praised Jim Jones. Our lieutenant governor of California, Mervyn Damali, he praised Jim Jones. They even had a testimonial dinner for Jim Jones in 1976 before He moved from the Greenfield Ranch in Mendocino County up by Ukiah and San Francisco, which I'm talking about the Masonic Temple at 1849 Geary Boulevard, and then moved down to British Guiana. They had a testimonial dinner from him, and Jerry Brown, governor of California, attended that dinner, as did Willie Brown, the sugar daddy for our vice president, as did our lieutenant governor, Mervyn Malley. He attended the testimonial dinner. Walter Mondale, presidential candidate, and First Lady Rosalind Carter, they both praised Jim Jones. In 1975, our CIA mayor of San Francisco, George Moscone, appointed Jim Jones as the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission. You should know that prior to that, Jim Jones was appointed the foreman of the grand jury of Mendocino County from like 1966-67 until his repositioning moved to San Francisco in 1975. He immediately became the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority. How do you like that? How do you like them apples, as people are known to say? Anyway, we don't talk about the Greenfield Ranch in the Redwood Valley in Mendocino, California, but that was home to Jim Jones and the People's Temple. It's 5,400 acres of property. Nobody talks about it. We talk about Jonestown, which, by the way, can't get a straight answer on that. It's around 3,800 to 4,999 acres. In other words, it's smaller than the Mendocino property where he previously lived with Leonard Lake. Leonard Lake, the lake. After Jim Jones and People's Temple vacated that property, Leonard Lake, the person, United States Marines, he moved in. He does snuff films. He is associated with killing 25 people, along with Charles Ng. He lived on the Greenfield Ranch after Jim Jones's People's Temple left. Then Leonard Lake lived next door to Leonard Lake. Leonard Lake, the man, U.S. Marine, lived next to Leonard Lake, the lake, where you could fish, on the Greenfield Ranch in Mendocino County, Northern California, when Jim Jones moved to Guyana. Do you see how preposterous these things are? I mean, the whole thing's a joke, people. You do realize that Dianne Feinstein is fake. You do realize that Nancy Pelosi is fake. You do realize that Ron DeSantis is a fake governor. You do realize that Gavin Newsom is a fake governor, and that Andrew Cuomo is a fake former governor of New York. These people have no authority. Come on. And Jeffrey Epstein, do you have any idea how many hundreds of Jeffrey Epsteins there must be? I mean, because this operation has never stopped. Never. Not ever. So you can just forget about the idea of picking one scapegoat. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Gotcha. You know where the real people are. If you want to stop the chemtrails, and you want to stop centralized bank control, digital currency, and you want to stop techno enslavement, you know where to go. You've watched my channels. I tell you, I give you specific addresses where the criminals live. You know, like the last people to see so-and-so alive. Go to that address and arrest every single person in that building. Just encircle all the buildings. And remember from watching my videos, don't just circle one. It's like Lay's potato chips. Circle all the buildings in that zip code. Because these are like lab rats. They just run to the next building, and they have little tunnel systems. You're dealing with rats. So, you know, think in terms of a professional person that's in the rat business, okay? All right, I can go on and on about the lies and mendacities about Jonestown, which never existed in real life, and probably still exists today under some other identified name. But I wanted to tell you that the media has never named any of the 4 people that were shot or fragged with automatic weapons in Benedict Canyon. I'm sure they never will. They are now telling us about the arrests of 3 hooligans who are 28 years old, 22 years old. 2 are 28 and 1 is 22. And I think they're scapegoats. I don't believe that hooligans from Chicago can come into military Benedict Canyon and go way, way up a dead-end cul-de-sac known as Ellison Drive at 2799 and escape unless they were allowed to do so, or, more importantly, NATO forces conducted the killings, and then they just rounded these knuckleheads up in Chicago and New York. All right, so hope you enjoyed Fandango Friday. They lie about little things and they lie about big things. All right, so COVID, a lot of mendacity with COVID, right? A lot of mendacity using the word vaccine, right? And then, saying that the crime scene looked like the Manson family. That's a mendacity because there was no Manson family and there is no Manson murder scene to refer to, since I think they're talking about NATO forces, like My Lai. Why don't you talk about, you notice how they don't introduce the My Lai massacre into television shows and detective shows and comedy shows, but they inject Manson into all of those platforms. They do that on purpose because they want to make a lie socially acceptable and presumed to be real history when it's completely fraudulent and fake. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.